The dust swirled like angry ghosts around Fiona Hughes as she laid out the last of her family heirlooms on the weathered blanket in Prescott's bustling market square. Arizona Territory, 1882, was unforgiving to a woman alone, and the relentless summer sun beating down on her felt like punishment for crimes she hadn't committed. She touched the silver hairbrush, her mother's final gift, before consumption took her, and swallowed the lump in her throat. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford, not with the debt collectors circling like vultures. "How much for the brooch, miss?" A woman in a crisp blue dress pointed at the sapphire pin, the last valuable thing Fiona owned besides her wedding ring. $5. Fiona's voice cracked. It was worth 20 at least, but desperation had its own economy, the woman sniffed. 3, and that's generous. Fiona nodded, accepting the coins with trembling fingers. Each sale was another piece of her past vanishing, but what choice did she have? 3 months since Daniel's death in the mine collapse, and his debts had proven more substantial than his promises. The bank would take her small home tomorrow unless she could produce the $60 she still owed. "Quite the collection you've got here." The deep voice startled her. She looked up into eyes the color of storm clouds, set in a sun-browned face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The stranger's gaze wasn't unkind, but it held an intensity that made her straighten her spine despite her exhaustion. "Family treasures," she replied, hating how her voice betrayed her sorrow. He crouched down beside her blanket, seemingly unbothered by the curious glances from passers-by. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, he didn't move like the miners or shopkeepers of Prescott. There was something deliberate in his movements, something watchful. "Beau Sadler," he said, offering a calloused hand, "just rode in from Tombstone. Fiona Hughes." She hesitated before accepting his handshake, noting the strength in his grip and the gentleness with which he withdrew it. "Are you looking for something specific, Mr. Sadler?" His eyes lingered on the gold wedding band she'd placed at the corner of the blanket, set apart from the other items. "Depends on what you're selling." The directness of his gaze made her cheeks warm. "Everything you see before you." "I have nothing left to hide." He nodded toward the small stack of coins beside her. "Business not going well, not nearly well enough." She wouldn't beg for sympathy from a stranger, no matter how desperate her circumstances. Beau Sadler's gaze swept over the dwindling collection, the silver-backed mirror, her father's pocket watch, a pearl necklace her husband had given her when times were better. His eyes returned to the wedding ring. "How much do you need?" he asked quietly. Fiona blinked. "Pardon." "To solve whatever problem has you selling your life piece by piece on a street corner." "How much?" She stared at him, searching for mockery or something worse in his expression, but found only steady inquiry. $60, she answered finally. "The bank takes my house tomorrow unless I can pay what my husband owed." Beau Sadler stood, brushing dust from his dark trousers. Without a word, he reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a leather wallet. Fiona watched, disbelieving, as he counted out bills and placed them on the corner of her blanket. $60, he said simply. Her hand flew to her throat. "I can't accept. You're not accepting anything. I'm buying." His lips curved slightly. "All of it." "But why would you pack it up?" he interrupted, glancing at the curious onlookers gathering nearby. "We're drawing attention." Fiona hesitated only a moment before gathering her belongings with shaking hands. Whatever this man's motives, they couldn't be worse than homelessness. As she wrapped the hairbrush in a handkerchief, her mind raced. Perhaps he was a collector. Perhaps he recognized value she didn't. As she finished, he offered his arm. "May I walk you home, Mrs. Hughes?" Fiona clutched her bundle to her chest. "Mr. Sadler, I appreciate your generosity, but I don't understand what you want in return." His expression softened. "A conversation, for starters, and maybe a cup of coffee if you're offering." Something in his steady gaze made her believe him, despite every warning bell ringing in her mind. She nodded slowly. "My home is this way," she said, gesturing down the dusty street. "Though I warn you, there's not much to it." "I've slept under the stars with nothing but my saddle for a pillow," he replied, falling into step beside her. "4 walls and a roof sound like luxury." They walked in silence through Prescott's busy streets. The town had grown rapidly since silver and gold were discovered in the nearby mountains. Miners, merchants, and all manner of fortune seekers crowded the wooden sidewalks. Fiona felt their curious stares as she passed with the tall stranger. A respectable widow did not entertain male callers, especially not unknown cowboys with mysterious intentions. Her small house sat at the edge of town, a modest wooden structure with a sagging porch and faded blue shutters. A patch of wildflowers struggled against the Arizona heat beside the front steps, her one attempt at making the place feel like home. "It's not much," she said, fumbling with the key, "but it was ours." Inside was neat but sparse. She'd already sold most of the furniture to pay previous installments on Daniel's debt. What remained was a small table with 2 chairs, a threadbare sofa, and the basic necessities of a kitchen. "Please sit," she offered, gesturing to one of the chairs while she moved to the stove. "I'll make that coffee." As she worked, she could feel his eyes on her, taking in the shabby surroundings, the empty spaces where furniture had once stood. She fought the urge to apologize for the poverty on display. "How long have you been in Prescott?" he asked, removing his hat and placing it on the table. 3 years. We came from St. Louis after Daniel heard about the mining opportunities." She measured coffee grounds with care, making them stretch. He had dreams of striking it rich, and instead he struck debt. Fiona paused, then nodded. He wasn't good with money, always certain the next big strike was just around the corner. She placed the coffee pot on the stove. "He was killed in a cave-in at the Silver Queen mine 3 months ago. That's when I discovered just how much he'd borrowed. I'm sorry for your loss." She turned to face him, studying his expression for insincerity but finding none. "Thank you, but you didn't come here to hear my troubles. What is it you really want, Mr. Sadler?" He leaned back in the chair, his long legs stretched before him. "I'm looking for a partner." Fiona nearly dropped the cups she was holding. "I beg your pardon," his lips quirked. "Not that kind of partner, a business partner." He gestured to the bundle of her belongings. "You have an eye for quality. I could use someone like you." She set the cups down with deliberate care. "I don't understand. I buy and sell goods across the territory, everything from livestock to luxury items for the fine ladies of Tucson and Phoenix. I'm good at finding buyers, but I'm not always the best at selecting merchandise that appeals to certain sensibilities." He tapped his fingers on the table, particularly those of a feminine nature. Fiona poured the coffee, buying time to process his words. "You want me to help you choose items to sell to women, among other things." He accepted the cup she offered. "I need someone who can handle accounts, correspond with suppliers, and yes, select merchandise. Someone honest and detail-oriented." He took a sip. "Your husband may not have been good with money, Mrs. Hughes, but I suspect you are." She sat across from him, cradling her cup. "What makes you think that? The way you arranged your items this morning, the careful pricing. The fact that this house, modest as it is spotless and well-maintained despite your circumstances." His eyes met hers. "And the ledger book I noticed on your shelf. Most widows in your position wouldn't bother tracking every penny." Fiona glanced at the worn book where she documented every desperate attempt to stretch her meager funds. Keeping track didn't change the outcome. No, but it shows character. He set his cup down. "I'm offering you a position, Mrs. Hughes. $75 a month plus a percentage of profits. You'd travel with me as my business associate." The sum made her eyes widen. It was more than triple what the millinery paid its most experienced seamstresses. "Travel with you." "That's hardly proper." "Nothing improper about it. We'd stay in separate accommodations in towns, and when camping, you'd have your privacy." He shrugged. "But I understand your concern for reputation. We could present ourselves as cousins if you prefer." Fiona stared into her coffee. The proposition was outlandish, yet tempting in a way that made her wary. "Why me? You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." His expression turned serious. "I've been watching you for 3 days, Mrs. Hughes. I've seen how you handle yourself, how you negotiate, how you maintain your dignity while selling everything you own." He leaned forward. "And I asked around. The shopkeepers speak highly of you. Even the bank manager, for all his ruthlessness about your debt, admitted you're a woman of integrity." The idea that this stranger had been investigating her should have been unsettling, but Fiona found herself oddly flattered by his thoroughness. What happens to my possessions? The ones you bought, they're yours. I never intended to keep them. His eyes crinkled at the corners. Consider them collateral on my investment in our partnership. She laughed despite herself. You have a peculiar way of doing business, Mr. Sadler. Beau, he corrected. And yes, I do. It's served me well so far. Fiona studied him, trying to see beyond the confident exterior. What if I'm not suited to the work? 3-month trial, he replied promptly. If either of us finds the arrangement unsatisfactory, we part ways. I'll ensure you have enough saved to establish yourself wherever you choose. It was generous, too generous. And if I refuse? Then I've overpaid for some lovely trinkets and you keep your house. He spread his hands. No harm done either way. The coffee pot hissed on the stove, filling the silence between them. Fiona's mind raced. She had no family to consider, no close friends in Prescott. The town held nothing for her but memories of broken promises and mounting debts. Even with her house saved, what future awaited her here? When would we leave? She asked finally. 2 days. Time enough for you to settle your affairs and pack what you need. He studied her face. Is that a yes, Mrs. Hughes? Fiona took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood at a crossroads. Behind her lay grief and struggle, ahead uncertainty but also possibility. Yes, Mr. Sadler Beau, I accept your proposal. His smile transformed his face, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. Then it seems we have a deal. He extended his hand across the table. When she placed her hand in his, Fiona couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just changed the course of her life irrevocably. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. The morning of their departure dawned clear and crisp, with the promise of heat to come as the sun climbed higher. Fiona stood on her porch, a single trunk at her feet containing all she'd chosen to keep. The house behind her was clean and empty, rented to a young couple for a modest sum that would provide a small income while she was away. She wore her best traveling dress, a navy blue affair with practical buttons and enough pocket room for necessities. Her chestnut hair was pinned neatly beneath a modest hat, and she'd allowed herself one indulgence. Her mother's pearl earrings, small enough to be practical but valuable enough to serve as emergency funds if needed, the clip-clop of hooves announced Beau's arrival. He guided a wagon down the dusty street, pulled by 2 sturdy horses. Behind the wagon, a handsome black gelding trotted, tethered loosely. "Morning, Mrs. Hughes," he called, tipping his hat. "Ready for adventure." "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, trying to ignore the flutter of nerves in her stomach. He jumped down from the wagon with easy grace and lifted her trunk as though it weighed nothing. "Traveling light, I approve. There seemed little point in bringing things I no longer need." She glanced back at the house. "I've left most of the furniture for the renters. Practical decision." He secured her trunk in the wagon bed, which already contained several crates and his own belongings. "We'll be stopping in Phoenix first. I have some business to conclude there, and it's a good place for you to get your bearings before we head into more remote territory." Fiona nodded, still uncertain about the wisdom of her decision, but committed nonetheless. She extended her hand toward the house key to give to him, but he shook his head. "Keep it. It's still your home." She tucked the key into her pocket, touched by the gesture. "Where will we be going after Phoenix?" "South to Tucson, then east toward New Mexico territory if all goes well." He offered his hand to help her onto the wagon seat. "I have clients scattered across the territories. Some are expecting deliveries, others will have goods for us to transport." As she settled onto the hard wooden bench, Fiona noticed how the wagon was outfitted for long travel. Canvas could be raised to provide shade or shelter from rain, and the bed had been modified with compartments for storage. "You've done this a long time," she observed as he climbed up beside her. 5 years on my own." He took up the reins. "Before that, I rode with my father. He taught me the trade." "And where is he now?" Beau's expression sobered. "Buried in Colorado. Influenza took him 3 winters ago." "I'm sorry," she said softly. He nodded his acknowledgement, then clicked to the horses. The wagon lurched forward, and Fiona found herself gripping the seat's edge. "Tell me about these clients of yours," she said, trying to focus on business rather than the growing distance between her and everything familiar. "What sorts of goods do they seek?" As they left Prescott behind, Beau described the network he'd built across Arizona territory and beyond. Ranchers who needed specialized equipment, mining companies requiring precision tools, wealthy women in growing towns who craved Eastern fashions and luxuries. Merchants in remote settlements who relied on him to bring supplies they couldn't otherwise obtain. It's not just about buying and selling, he explained as the wagon rumbled down the dusty road. It's about knowing what people need before they know it themselves. And how do you manage that? Fiona asked, genuinely curious. He smiled. I listen. Most folks are happy to talk about their troubles and wishes if someone shows interest. He glanced at her. That's where you'll excel, I think. Women will tell you things they'd never share with me. The morning passed pleasantly as they traveled south. Fiona was surprised by Beau's easy conversation and breadth of knowledge. He pointed out landmarks, told her about the plants and animals they encountered, and shared amusing stories about his travels. By midday, when they stopped to rest the horses and eat, Fiona found herself more at ease than she'd expected. They sat in the shade of a large cottonwood tree near a small creek, sharing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit. May I ask you something personal? Fiona ventured, watching as Beau checked the horse's hooves for stones. Ask away, he replied without looking up. Can't promise I'll answer, but you're welcome to try. Why aren't you married? A successful man like yourself must have had opportunities. His hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work. Had a near miss once. Sarah was her name, daughter of a rancher in Texas. He straightened, meeting Fiona's gaze. She wanted me to settle down, run her father's spread. I wanted to keep moving. You chose freedom over love. I chose my life over hers. He shrugged, but Fiona sensed the casualness was affected. We wouldn't have made each other happy in the end. Do you regret it, sometimes? He sat beside her, stretching his long legs, but regrets a poor companion on the trail, better to look ahead than behind. He studied her face. What about you? Any regrets about Daniel? Fiona looked away, watching the water ripple over stones in the creek. I regret not seeing him clearly sooner. He wasn't a bad man, just restless. Always chasing the next opportunity instead of making the most of what was before him. And yet you stayed. I made vows, she said simply. For better or worse. Mostly it was worse, but I chose to honor my commitment. Beau nodded slowly. That speaks to your character. He stood, offering his hand. We should keep moving if we want to reach our campsite before dark. As they continued their journey, the landscape changed. The pine forests around Prescott gave way to rockier terrain, and the heat intensified as they descended in elevation. Fiona removed her gloves and loosened the collar of her dress, unprepared for the oppressive warmth. Here, Beau passed her a canteen. Small sips, but regular. Desert will dry you out before you know it's happening. She followed his advice, rationing the water carefully. How much further until we camp? Another 2 hours. There's a good spot near a spring I know. He glanced at the sky. We're making good time, should be settled before sunset. True to his word, they reached the campsite with daylight to spare a sheltered area near a small spring, with enough vegetation to provide grazing for the horses. Beau moved with practiced efficiency, unhitching the team and setting up camp while Fiona gathered firewood. You've done this before, he observed as she arranged kindling in a neat pile. My father took me hunting when I was young, she explained. Before he died, we spent many nights under the stars. A woman of hidden talents, he smiled, striking a match to light the fire. I knew I chose well. As darkness fell, they sat beside the crackling flames, eating a hot meal of beans and salt pork that tasted better than Fiona would have thought possible after a long day's travel. The desert night grew chilly, and she wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Tomorrow we'll reach more populated areas, Beau said, pouring her a cup of coffee. The road to Phoenix is well traveled. We'll likely encounter other wagons. Have you had trouble on the road before? She asked, suddenly aware of how vulnerable they were, alone in the wilderness. Occasionally, he took a sip of his coffee. I carry protection and I know which areas to avoid. He nodded toward the wagon where Fiona knew a rifle and pistol were stored. Can you shoot? Yes, though it's been years. We'll practice when time allows. Out here, it's a necessary skill. They lapsed into comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds around them, the soft whicker of horses, the distant call of a coyote, the crackle of the fire. The stars emerged, brilliant and countless against the black sky. "It's beautiful," Fiona murmured, gazing upward. "One advantage of this life," Beau agreed. "You see things most people miss." When it was time to retire, Beau showed her how he'd arranged the wagon bed. A canvas partition divided the space, with her area enclosed for privacy. He would sleep on a bedroll near the fire. "I'll be within earshot if you need anything," he assured her. "Don't hesitate to call out." Alone in her makeshift quarters, Fiona changed into her nightdress and lay down on the surprisingly comfortable bedding. Through the canvas, she could see the silhouette of Beau moving around the fire, banking it for the night. She listened to his footsteps fade as he made a final check of the horses, then returned to his bedroll. The reality of her situation struck her suddenly. She was miles from civilization with a man she barely knew, headed into an uncertain future. Yet strangely, she felt no fear, only a quiet anticipation. For the first time since Daniel's death, perhaps, even before she felt the stirring of hope. Sleep claimed her quickly, the exhaustion of travel and emotion taking its toll. She dreamed of open roads and distant horizons, and a tall figure always walking just ahead, leading the way forward. The journey to Phoenix took 3 days, during which Fiona learned more about the business and about her enigmatic employer. Beau was methodical in his record-keeping, showing her the system of ledgers and correspondence he maintained with clients across the territories. His reputation, she discovered, was built on reliability and discretion. "People trust me with their business because they know I won't betray their confidence," he explained as they traversed a particularly rough stretch of road. "Some of my clients are competitors with each other. I never discuss one's affairs with another." "A gentleman's code," Fiona observed. "Just good business," he smiled. "Though I appreciate you thinking me a gentleman." As they neared Phoenix, the traffic on the road increased. They passed freight wagons, stagecoaches, and riders on horseback. Beau greeted many by name, evidence of his extensive network. Phoenix itself was a revelation to Fiona. Though not as established as Prescott, it was growing rapidly, with imposing brick buildings rising alongside more modest wooden structures. The streets bustled with activity, and she noticed the diversity of the population: Mexican families, Chinese laborers, Eastern businessmen, and Native Americans from nearby tribes. Beau secured rooms for them at a respectable hotel near the center of town. As promised, their accommodations were entirely separate, with Fiona given a small but clean room overlooking the main street. After days on the trail, the luxury of a real bed and private bath was almost overwhelming. "Rest today," Beau suggested after escorting her to her door. "Tomorrow we'll begin our business calls. I've arranged several meetings with clients who might appreciate your perspective." Alone in her room, Fiona soaked in a hot bath, washing away the dust of travel. As she dried her hair by the window, watching the street below, she felt a curious sense of freedom. In Prescott, she'd been defined by her circumstances, the struggling widow, the object of pity or scorn. Here, no one knew her history. She could be whoever she chose. The following morning, dressed in her second-best gown, a forest green affair with modest trim that nonetheless flattered her figure, Fiona met Beau in the hotel dining room. He stood when she entered, and she noted with satisfaction the appreciative glance he gave her before his expression returned to professional courtesy. "You look well rested," he commented as he held her chair. "Amazing what a real bed and bath can do," she replied with a smile. "What's our agenda today?" As they ate breakfast, Beau outlined their schedule: a meeting with a prominent banker who wanted Eastern-style furnishings for his new home, followed by a visit to a dressmaker who sought quality fabrics and notions, then lunch with the owner of Phoenix's largest general store. "The banker's wife will be present," Beau mentioned. "Mrs. Thornton has definite opinions about decor. I'm hoping you can interpret her wishes better than I could alone." Fiona nodded, feeling a flutter of nerves but also excitement. "I'll do my best." The day proved both challenging and exhilarating. Mrs. Thornton was indeed particular, but Fiona quickly gained her confidence by asking thoughtful questions and offering suggestions that aligned with the woman's taste. By the end of their meeting, they had detailed notes on exactly what furnishings to seek on their next trip east. "You were magnificent," Beau murmured as they left the banker's office. "She was ready to dismiss me entirely until you spoke up." Fiona couldn't help feeling pleased. She just needed someone who understood her vision. The dressmaker proved equally receptive to Fiona's input, and by lunchtime, they had secured substantial orders that would justify a buying trip to St. Louis or even Chicago. Over the next 3 days, they established a rhythm. Mornings were spent in meetings, afternoons in visiting shops to examine existing inventory, and evening in compiling notes and writing correspondence. Fiona discovered she had a talent for anticipating clients' needs and translating vague descriptions into specific requests. On their 4th night in Phoenix, Beau invited her to dinner at the city's finest restaurant. "To celebrate our successful partnership," he explained, "the establishment was elegant by territorial standards, with linen tablecloths and crystal glassware." Fiona felt conspicuous in her best dress, the blue one she'd saved for special occasions, but Beau's approval was evident in his eyes. "You belong in places like this," he said as they were seated. "You have a natural grace." "Flattery will get you nowhere, Mr. Sadler," she replied lightly, though the compliment pleased her. "I'm a practical woman at heart. Practical women are rare and valuable." He ordered wine for them both, "especially ones who can also appreciate beauty." As they dined on tender steaks and fresh vegetables luxuries after trail food, Fiona found herself studying Beau with new interest. In town, he'd exchanged his trail clothes for a well-tailored suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, and without the dust of travel, his features seemed sharper, more defined. "You're staring," he observed, amusement in his voice. Fiona felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was just thinking how different you look in town clothes, more civilized." He raised an eyebrow. "More polished," she corrected. "Though I suspect it's just another role you play." His smile widened. "Perceptive as always, Mrs. Hughes. We all wear masks according to the company we keep." "And which is the real Beau Sadler, the trail guide or the businessman?" He considered this, swirling the wine in his glass. "Both, neither." His eyes met hers. "Does it matter?" "It might," she replied softly, "if we're to be partners." Something in his expression shifted, a momentary vulnerability quickly concealed. "The real Beau Sadler is a work in progress, I'm afraid, but I promise you this: I'm honest in my dealings and loyal to those who earn my trust." He raised his glass. "To partnerships built on truth." She touched her glass to his, feeling that they'd crossed some invisible boundary. "To truth." After dinner, they walked back to the hotel through streets still lively with evening activity. Without conscious thought, Fiona found her hand resting in the crook of Beau's arm. Their steps matched in an easy rhythm. "We leave for Tucson in 2 days," he said as they approached the hotel. "The road is more challenging, but the scenery is worth it." "I'm looking forward to it," she replied, surprised to find she meant it. The thought of returning to the trail, to the simple routine of travel and the beauty of wild places, appealed to her more than she'd expected. At her door, Beau hesitated. "Thank you for your company tonight, and for your exceptional work these past days." "Thank you for the opportunity," she answered, aware of his proximity, of the warmth radiating from him in the cool hallway. For a moment it seemed he might say more, might even step closer. Instead, he inclined his head slightly. "Good night, Fiona." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice made something flutter in her chest. "Good night, Beau." Inside her room, Fiona moved to the window, watching as Beau emerged onto the street below and walked toward the livery where they'd stabled the horses. His tall figure moved with purpose, disappearing into the gathering darkness. She pressed a hand to her racing heart, acknowledging what she'd been trying to ignore. She was attracted to him. Not just to his handsome features or his strength, but to his mind, his principles, his quiet competence. It was dangerous territory for a business arrangement, yet she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The road to Tucson proved every bit as challenging as Beau had warned. The terrain was rugged, the heat more intense, and water sources fewer. They traveled slowly, often stopping to rest the horses during the hottest part of the day. On their third day out from Phoenix, they encountered trouble. The wagon's rear axle cracked as they crossed a dry wash, the sound of splitting wood followed by a sickening lurch. Beau swore under his breath, jumping down to inspect the damage. Fiona followed, holding her skirts clear of the dusty ground. "How bad is it?" she asked, peering beneath the wagon. "Bad enough," he replied grimly. "We can't continue without repairs." He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "There's a small settlement about 5 miles ahead. We might find someone there who can help." "Can we make it that far?" "Not with the wagon loaded." He gazed at the sparse landscape around them. "We'll need to make camp here, unload enough to lighten the weight, and I'll ride ahead to find assistance." They worked quickly, setting up a basic camp and removing the heaviest crates from the wagon. Beau rigged a temporary brace for the axle, but Fiona could see it was a precarious solution at best. "I don't like leaving you alone," he said as he prepared to ride out, checking his pistol before securing it in its holster. "But there's no alternative." "I'll be fine," she assured him, though the thought of being alone in the wilderness made her uneasy. "I have the rifle, and you showed me how to use it." He studied her face, then reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small derringer. "Keep this with you. It's easier to handle than the rifle if you're caught by surprise." He demonstrated how to load and fire it, then placed it in her hands. "I'll be back by nightfall if all goes well. If I'm not—" He hesitated. "If I'm not back by noon tomorrow, take the black gelding and ride to the settlement. Follow the main trail, you can't miss it." Fiona nodded, her throat tight with sudden fear not for herself but for him. "Be careful. Always am." He swung up onto his horse. "Stay alert, keep the fire small, and don't wander far from camp." With a final nod, he turned his mount and rode away, soon disappearing among the rocky outcroppings. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Fiona busied herself organizing their supplies, tending the horses, and gathering what little firewood she could find. The derringer remained tucked in her pocket, a small comfort against the growing shadows. As sunset approached, the desert transformed. The harsh glare softened into golden light, casting long shadows across the landscape. Despite her anxiety, Fiona couldn't help but appreciate the wild beauty surrounding her. The distant mountains turned purple in the fading light, the delicate wildflowers closing for the night, the first stars appearing in the eastern sky. She built a small fire as darkness fell, positioning herself so she could watch the trail while remaining partially concealed. Every sound made her tense: the call of a night bird, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the occasional shifting of the hobbled horses. When hoofbeats finally approached, nearly 3 hours after sunset, Fiona raised the rifle with trembling hands. She lowered it immediately when Beau's familiar silhouette appeared, accompanied by another rider. "Found help," Beau called as they neared the camp. "This is Miguel Ortiz. He's a wheelwright from San Xavier." The man who dismounted beside Beau was shorter and stockier, with a weathered face and capable hands. He nodded politely to Fiona. "Senora, your husband says you have trouble with an axle." Fiona glanced at Beau, who gave an almost imperceptible shrug. She understood immediately. In these remote areas, a woman traveling with a man who wasn't her husband would raise eyebrows at best, invite danger at worst. "Yes," she replied, deciding to maintain the fiction. "Thank you for coming so late." "Is no problem, I bring tools." Miguel gestured to the packs on his horse. "We fix in the morning when there is light. Tonight we rest." As the men unsaddled their horses, Beau moved close to Fiona. "Sorry about the husband bit," he murmured. "Seemed simpler." "It was the right decision," she assured him. "I'm just glad you're back safely." Something in her voice must have revealed her earlier anxiety, for his expression softened. "Were you worried?" "A little," she admitted. "It's very quiet out here when you're alone." He touched her arm briefly, the gesture oddly comforting. "You did well. Camp is secure, fire is managed, and you were ready to defend yourself." His approval warmed her more than it should have. With Miguel's help, they shared a hot meal and conversation around the campfire. The wheelwright proved to be excellent company, regaling them with stories of the area and its inhabitants. Fiona learned that San Xavier was primarily a mission settlement, home to members of the Tohono O'odham Nation and a handful of Mexican families like Miguel's. My grandfather was the first wheelwright, he explained proudly. He teach my father teach me, now I teach my son. A family tradition, Fiona said with a smile. That's wonderful. You have children, Senora? Miguel asked. The question caught her off guard. No, she replied softly. We've not been so blessed. Beau's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing gently. The simple gesture of support touched her deeply. When it was time to sleep, Miguel politely retreated to the far side of the camp, giving them privacy. Beau arranged their bedrolls side by side beneath the wagon, maintaining the pretense of marriage while creating enough distance for propriety. Thank you for playing along, he whispered as they settled in for the night. I wouldn't have involved you in a deception otherwise. I understand. She lay facing him, their features barely visible in the dying firelight. It's a practical solution. His eyes studied her face. Still, I don't take lies lightly, even convenient ones. Nor do I. She hesitated, then added, but I trust your judgment. The simple statement seemed to affect him deeply. He reached out, his fingers just brushing a strand of hair from her face. Sleep well, wife, he murmured. Dawn comes early in the desert. Despite the hard ground and unfamiliar surroundings, Fiona slept soundly, comforted by Beau's presence nearby. She woke to the sound of hammering and the smell of coffee brewing. Miguel and Beau were already at work on the wagon, the damaged axle removed and laid beside a new piece of wood they were shaping. Fiona quickly freshened up behind a screen of boulders, then joined them, offering to prepare breakfast while they worked. Your wife is kind, Miguel commented to Beau as she handed them tin cups of coffee. And pretty too. You are a fortunate man. I certainly am, Beau replied with such conviction that Fiona nearly dropped the coffee pot. By midday, the repair was complete. Miguel refused payment beyond a fair price for the wood and supplies, saying the company and Fiona's excellent cooking were compensation enough. You are welcome in San Xavier anytime, he told them as he prepared to leave. My wife would like to meet the Senora. After he'd gone, Fiona turned to Beau. We should discuss this husband-wife pretense. I assume it won't be the last time we need to employ it. He nodded, looking somewhat uncomfortable. It's safer in many places for you to be perceived as married either to me or to some absent husband. Unfortunately, a woman traveling alone with a man is assumed to be something else entirely. I understand that, she folded her arms. I'm not objecting to the practicality of it. I just think we should be clear about when and where we use this particular fiction. Agreed. He seemed relieved by her pragmatic approach. In larger towns where we have established business contacts, we present ourselves as business associates. In more remote areas or with strangers, husband and wife is safer. And how should we explain the different surnames in our paperwork? We can say you keep your family name for business purposes. He smiled slightly. It's not unheard of, especially for a woman with her own connections. With the matter settled, they reloaded the wagon and continued their journey. The repair held well, and they made good time across the increasingly arid landscape. The final day's travel to Tucson brought them across a vast desert plain with distant mountains shimmering in the heat. Fiona had never seen such desolate beauty, the stark shapes of saguaro cacti standing like sentinels, the occasional flash of color from wildflowers that somehow thrived in the harsh conditions, the endless blue of the Arizona sky. It's magnificent, she said, gazing across the vast expanse. So different from anywhere I've been. The desert grows on you, Beau replied, his eyes scanning the horizon with practiced vigilance. It seems empty at first, but once you learn to see, you realize it's full of life and secrets. Tucson itself appeared suddenly, a sprawling settlement nestled against the base of mountains. Unlike Phoenix with its American business district, Tucson retained much of its Spanish and Mexican character. Adobe buildings with flat roofs lined narrow streets, and the sound of Spanish was as common as English. Their accommodations were more modest here, rooms above a cantina owned by one of Beau's long-standing clients. The woman who greeted them, Doña Martina, embraced Beau like a son and eyed Fiona with frank curiosity. So you bring a woman this time, she said in accented English. About time you find companionship, Beau. Fiona is my business partner, Beau explained, though Fiona noted he didn't correct the underlying assumption. She's helping me expand into new markets. Doña Martina raised an eyebrow but said only, of course, business. She showed them to their rooms, simple but clean, connected by a small shared sitting area. You rest, then come down for dinner. I make something special. Once alone, Fiona explored her room, appreciating its simple comfort after days on the trail. Through the open window, she could hear the sounds of the town voices calling in Spanish and English, the clatter of carts on cobblestones, distant music from somewhere down the street. A knock at the door connecting their rooms brought her back to the present. She opened it to find Beau, freshly washed and changed into clean clothes. Martina is one of my oldest friends in the territory, he explained. She and her late husband gave me my first major contract when I started out on my own. She seems fond of you, Fiona observed. She's been trying to marry me off for years. He leaned against the doorframe. Fair warning, she'll probably interrogate you over dinner, Fiona laughed. I can handle a few personal questions. Don't be so sure, Martina is relentless. His eyes twinkled with amusement. If you feel overwhelmed, give me a signal and I'll create a diversion. What sort of signal? He considered this. Touch your earring, I'll do the rest. The shared moment of conspiracy created a pleasant intimacy between them as they descended to the cantina's dining room. Doña Martina had indeed prepared a feast: spicy stews, fresh tortillas, roasted vegetables, and sweet pastries for dessert. True to Beau's prediction, the questions began as soon as they were seated. So Fiona, Martina said, filling their glasses with deep red wine, how did you come to work with our Beau? He never takes partners. Fiona glanced at Beau, who nodded slightly, giving her permission to tell their story. We met in Prescott. I was in difficult circumstances after my husband's death. Beau offered me a position that suited my skills. And what skills are those, if I may ask? Organization, correspondence, an eye for quality merchandise. Fiona sipped her wine. And perhaps a woman's perspective on what other women might want to purchase. Martina nodded approvingly. Smart. Women control more money than men realize. She turned to Beau. This one is clever. Don't let her go. As the evening progressed, the questions became more personal. Had Fiona been happily married? Did she plan to remarry? Was she finding comfort in her travels or seeking a place to settle? Through it all, Fiona maintained her composure, answering honestly but reserving the most private parts of her story. When Martina began hinting about Beau's need for a permanent companion, Fiona touched her earring, catching his eye across the table. Without missing a beat, Beau launched into a story about their wagon breaking down, describing Miguel's assistance with such animated detail that Martina was soon laughing too hard to continue her interrogation. Later, as they walked through the town's quiet streets to clear their heads before retiring, Fiona thanked him for the rescue. You were holding your own admirably, he replied, but I saw the questions were becoming uncomfortable. It's not that. She hesitated, trying to articulate her feelings. I just don't know the answers myself, about settling down again, about what I want for my future. Everything has changed so quickly. Beau nodded, understanding in his expression. You don't need to have it all figured out. Some of the best journeys have no fixed destination. They paused at the edge of the town plaza, where a small fountain gurgled beneath ancient mesquite trees. The night was warm, the air fragrant with desert blossoms and the lingering scents from cooking fires. When I was a girl, Fiona said softly, I used to dream of adventures, of seeing places I'd only read about in books. Then I married Daniel, and those dreams seemed childish, impractical. And now? Beau asked, his voice equally quiet. She turned to face him, struck by the intensity of his gaze in the moonlight. Now I wonder if they weren't the most practical dreams of all, if perhaps knowing the world isn't a luxury but a necessity for truly understanding one's place in it. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. You continue to surprise me, Fiona Hughes. The way he said her name sent a pleasant shiver through her. They stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the clean scent of soap and leather that she'd come to associate with his presence. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he offered his arm. "We should head back. Tomorrow will be a busy day." The next 2 weeks in Tucson established a pattern that would carry them through subsequent stops. Days were filled with business meetings, inspecting goods, negotiating contracts, and maintaining correspondence with clients throughout the territories. Evenings were often spent in social engagements that served dual purposes, cementing business relationships, while gathering intelligence about market needs and opportunities. Fiona flourished in this environment, her natural charm and sharp mind earning respect from Beau's associates. She began developing her own contacts, particularly among the wives of businessmen who appreciated her understanding of their needs and preferences. Their pretense of being merely business associates was maintained in professional settings, but Fiona couldn't help noticing how others perceived them. The glances exchanged when they completed each other's thoughts in meetings, the assumptions made when they arrived together at social functions, the knowing smiles when they engaged in the easy banter that had developed between them. For his part, Beau seemed content to let others think what they would. He treated her with unfailing respect in public, while in private, their relationship grew increasingly comfortable. They spent hours discussing business strategies, sharing observations about people they'd met, or simply enjoying each other's company in companionable silence. Only occasionally did Fiona catch him watching her with an expression that suggested thoughts beyond their professional arrangement when she laughed with particular abandon. When she successfully negotiated a difficult contract, when the desert wind caught her hair and released it from its pins. In those moments, she felt a responding flutter in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the Arizona heat. Yet neither of them acknowledged this growing attraction, as if by mutual unspoken agreement. From Tucson, they journeyed east toward New Mexico territory, stopping at small settlements and isolated ranches along the way. In these remote locations, they presented themselves as husband and wife without discussion, falling into the roles with surprising ease. At a small trading post near the territorial border, they encountered the first significant test of their partnership. The owner, a burly man named Harlan Pike, took an immediate dislike to Beau and an uncomfortable interest in Fiona. "Pretty lady like you could do better than traveling with a saddle tramp," Pike commented while Beau was outside examining a shipment of goods. "I got a nice setup here, could use a woman's touch." Fiona maintained her polite smile while shifting away from his proximity. "I'm quite satisfied with my current arrangement, Mr. Pike. My husband and I have built our business together." Pike snorted. "Husband, that's what he's calling himself these days." He leaned closer, his breath sour with whiskey despite the early hour. "I know Sadler, never stays anywhere long. Never commits to anything or anyone. You seem to have confused him with someone else," Fiona replied coldly. "Now, about the fabric samples you requested." Pike's hand clamped around her wrist. "Don't play innocent, sweetheart. I know what kind of woman travels with a man like that." Before Fiona could respond, the door opened and Beau entered. His casual stance shifted immediately as he assessed the situation, his expression darkening. "Problem here, Pike." His voice was dangerously quiet. The trader released Fiona's wrist but maintained his belligerent stance. "Just getting acquainted with your wife. Funny, last time you came through, you were alone. People's circumstances change." Beau moved to Fiona's side, his hand coming to rest at the small of her back, protective without being possessive. "We're finished here. The goods you ordered will be delivered by another supplier." Pike's face reddened. "Now wait just a minute, no." Beau's single word cut through the air like a blade. "We're done. Come on, Fiona." Outside, Fiona took a deep breath of fresh air, fighting to maintain her composure. "What was that about?" He seemed to have some personal grudge. Beau guided her toward their wagon, his expression grim. "Pike and I have history. He used to run a saloon in Santa Fe where he mistreated the women who worked for him. I helped one of them escape to California." His jaw tightened. "He's held a grudge ever since. You never mentioned this before. I didn't think we'd need to stop here. The regular route is washed out from recent rains." He looked down at her, concern evident in his eyes. "Did he hurt you?" Fiona shook her head. "Just my pride. And perhaps my faith in human nature. Pike isn't representative of humanity." Beau's voice softened. Though I'm sorry you had to encounter him at all. That night they camped under the stars, having decided to push on rather than stay in the small settlement near Pike's trading post. As they sat beside the fire, Fiona found herself watching Beau with new curiosity. "The woman you helped," she said finally. "Was she special to you?" He looked up from the coffee he was brewing. "Maria, not in the way you're asking. She was 19, alone and desperate." He poured the coffee into tin cups. "I simply provided the means for her to start over somewhere safe. That was kind of you. It was human decency." He handed her a cup. Nothing extraordinary, but it was extraordinary, Fiona thought. In a world where men like Pike preyed on vulnerable women, Beau's intervention represented something rare and valuable moral courage without expectation of reward. "Have you done that often?" she asked. "Helped people escape difficult situations?" He seemed uncomfortable with the direction of her questions. Occasionally, when the opportunity presents itself, Fiona sipped her coffee, connecting pieces of a puzzle she hadn't realized she'd been assembling. "Like you helped me." Beau's eyes met hers across the fire. "Your situation was different. Was it? I was desperate, about to lose everything." "Yes, but you weren't seeking rescue." A small smile touched his lips. "You were fighting your own battle. I merely offered an alternative strategy." The distinction mattered to him, she realized. He didn't see himself as her savior, but as her ally. The realization warmed her more than the fire before them. "Well, whatever your intention," she said softly, "I'm grateful our paths crossed." They reached Santa Fe a week later, the journey uneventful after their encounter with Pike. The territorial capital impressed Fiona with its blend of cultures, Spanish, Mexican, Native American, and American influences visible in its architecture, markets, and populace. Their accommodations were more luxurious here, a small suite in a hotel that catered to Eastern tourists and wealthy merchants. Beau explained that Santa Fe represented one of their most important markets, with clients ranging from government officials to wealthy traders to native artisans. "We'll be here at least 2 weeks," he said as they settled into their rooms. "Possibly longer if certain opportunities develop as I hope." The opportunities became clear the following day when Beau introduced Fiona to Eleanor Whitfield, the wife of the territorial governor, Mrs. Whitfield, a formidable woman with impeccable Eastern connections, had taken it upon herself to bring civilization to Santa Fe in the form of proper furnishings, fashions, and social customs. "My dear Mr. Sadler has been promising to find me someone who truly understands quality," Mrs. Whitfield declared, appraising Fiona with sharp eyes. "I do hope you're that person, Mrs. Hughes." "I believe I can be of assistance," Fiona replied carefully, "though I should mention that I'm not married, I'm a widow." Mrs. Whitfield waved a dismissive hand. "All the better. No husband to distract you from business." She gave Beau a pointed look. "Unless there are other arrangements in the works," Beau maintained a neutral expression. "Mrs. Hughes and I are business associates. Of course you are, Mrs. Whitfield's tone suggested she believed otherwise, but was too well-bred to say so directly. "Well then, shall we discuss what I require for the governor's mansion? We're hosting a delegation from Washington next month, and everything must be perfect." What followed was an exhaustive inventory of needs, from specific furniture pieces, to fabrics for draperies, to table settings for formal dinners. Fiona took detailed notes, occasionally suggesting alternatives when Mrs. Whitfield's requests seemed impractical given supply constraints. By the end of the meeting, Mrs. Whitfield was visibly impressed. "You have a good head on your shoulders, Mrs. Hughes, and a realistic understanding of what can be accomplished in these primitive conditions." She turned to Beau. "I approve of your choice, Mr. Sadler. See that you don't lose her to a competitor." After she'd departed, Beau grinned at Fiona. "Congratulations. You've been accepted by the territorial aristocracy." "She's rather overwhelming," Fiona admitted, "but influential. Her approval opens doors throughout the territory." He reviewed her notes. "This order alone will justify a buying trip to St. Louis, possibly even New York." "New York." Fiona couldn't keep the excitement from her voice. "I've always wanted to see it." Beau watched her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "Then we should make it happen." The following days were filled with similar meetings with merchants, government officials, and wealthy residents of Santa Fe. Fiona's role expanded beyond advisor to active negotiator, with Beau increasingly deferring to her judgment in matters of taste and quality. Their evenings were often occupied with social engagements, dinner parties, small gatherings at private homes, and once a formal ball at the governor's mansion. For this last event, Beau surprised Fiona with a gown of deep burgundy silk, simple but elegant, accompanied by a modest pearl necklace. "I can't accept these," she protested when he presented the items. "It's too extravagant. It's a business expense," he countered. "We need to make the right impression tonight. The governor's guests include potential clients from as far as Denver and St. Louis." When she emerged from her room that evening, dressed in the burgundy gown with her hair arranged in a simple but flattering style, Beau's expression made her momentarily forget their business arrangement. He looked at her, as a man looks at a woman he desires, his admiration undisguised. "You are beautiful," he said simply. Fiona felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." It was true in formal evening wear. Beau cut an impressive figure, his natural ruggedness tempered but not diminished by the elegant clothing. At the ball, they maintained their professional demeanor, though Fiona noticed Mrs. Whitfield watching them with speculative interest. They danced together once, a necessary social formality, but the experience left Fiona breathless in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Beau moved with surprising grace for a man accustomed to life on horseback, guiding her through the waltz with confident hands. The respectable distance between them did nothing to diminish the intimacy of the moment, the slight pressure of his hand at her waist, the way his eyes never left hers, the shared rhythm of their movements. "You dance well for a frontier businessman," she observed, trying to lighten the sudden tension between them. "My mother insisted I learn," he replied with a small smile. "She was determined I would be a gentleman, despite my father's nomadic tendencies. Tell me about her, your mother." A shadow passed over his features. She was beautiful, refined, from a good Boston family who never forgave her for marrying my father. His expression softened with memory. "She loved books, music, taught me to appreciate beauty in unexpected places. She sounds remarkable." She was. The music was drawing to a close, and Fiona felt a pang of regret. "She died when I was 16, pneumonia. I'm sorry." The simple words seemed inadequate for the loss she saw reflected in his eyes. It was a long time ago. The dance ended, and he stepped back, the proper distance between them restored. "Shall we continue our circuit of the room? I believe the railroad commissioner wanted to meet you." The evening continued, business discussions interspersed with social pleasantries, but something had changed between them. A door had been opened, offering a glimpse of the man behind the businessman, the personal history that had shaped Beau Sadler into the complex individual who had entered her life so unexpectedly. Later that night, as they walked back to their hotel through Santa Fe's quiet streets, Fiona found the courage to ask what had been on her mind. "Your mother, would she approve of the life you've chosen?" Beau was silent for several steps. "She wanted security for me. A profession, a home, a family." He glanced at Fiona. "In that sense, perhaps she would be disappointed. But in other ways, she valued independence, courage, integrity." His voice softened. "In those respects, I hope I've honored her memory." "I think you have," Fiona said quietly. "From what I've seen these past weeks, you embody those qualities." He stopped walking, turning to face her beneath a gas lamp that cast golden light over his features. "Your good opinion means more to me than it should, Fiona." The honesty of the statement hung between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that transcended their business arrangement. For a breathless moment, Fiona thought he might close the distance between them, might finally address the unspoken attraction that had been growing since their journey began. Instead, he offered his arm once more. "It's getting late. We should return to the hotel." Fiona took his arm, disappointment mingling with a strange relief. Whatever was developing between them deserved careful consideration, not an impulsive decision made in the emotional aftermath of an evening unlike any she'd experienced before. Their business in Santa Fe concluded successfully, with contracts secured and relationships established that would serve them well in future endeavors. As they prepared for the journey to their next destination, a small settlement in the northeastern part of the territory, Beau presented Fiona with an accounting of their transactions. "Your commission," he said, handing her an envelope. "As agreed, plus a bonus for exceeding our targets." Fiona opened the envelope, her eyes widening at the sum inside. "This is generous. It's fair." He sat across from her at the small desk in their hotel sitting room. "You've more than earned it." She studied the banknotes, a tangible representation of her new independence. "I never imagined I could earn this much. You're valuable, Fiona." The sincerity in his voice made her look up, "not just to our business, but to," he hesitated, "to the success of this enterprise." She sensed he'd been about to say something else but had retreated to safer ground. "Thank you for the opportunity to prove that value." He nodded, then cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about our next steps after we complete the circuit of the territory." "Oh." Fiona tried to ignore the sudden anxiety his words provoked. Was he planning to end their partnership? "The orders we've secured from Mrs. Whitfield and others will require significant purchases." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I think we should consider a buying trip to the east, St. Louis at minimum, possibly Chicago or even New York as you mentioned." Relief washed over her. "That sounds logical. It would mean several months of travel," he continued. "By train rather than wagon, thankfully, but still a significant commitment." His eyes held hers. "Are you willing to continue our arrangement for that length of time?" The question seemed to carry more weight than its surface meaning. Fiona considered her answer carefully. "I am," she said finally. "I've found our partnership to be satisfying." She chose the word deliberately, watching his reaction. Something flickered in his eyes, satisfaction, perhaps, or something deeper. "Good. Then we'll finalize the plans after our next stop." The journey to Eagle's Rest, the small settlement in the northeastern corner of the territory, took them through increasingly rugged terrain. The wagon creaked over rocky passes and through narrow canyons, the landscape growing more dramatic with each mile. "It's beautiful," Fiona commented as they crested a ridge overlooking a vast valley, "but it seems an unlikely place for commerce." Eagle's Rest serves as a trading hub for ranchers and miners scattered throughout the region, Beau explained. "It's small but strategically located, and the new silver strikes in the mountains to the north have brought prosperity." He pointed to a plume of dust in the distance. "That's probably the stage from Denver. It stops here twice a week, bringing mail and supplies." Eagle's Rest proved to be little more than a wide spot in the trail, a general store, a combined saloon and hotel, a livery stable, and a scattering of small houses and businesses. Yet despite its modest appearance, the settlement buzzed with activity. Wagons lined the single street, and men in the practical attire of ranchers and miners moved purposefully between establishments. The hotel, grandly named the Eagle's Nest, offered basic but clean accommodations. As they registered, the proprietor, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, raised an eyebrow at their arrangement. "2 rooms?" he asked skeptically. "Adjoining, my wife and I require some privacy," Beau replied smoothly, signing the register as Mr. and Mrs. Sadler. "I have correspondence to manage late into the night, and she's a light sleeper." The explanation seemed to satisfy the man, who handed over 2 keys. "Rooms 3 and 4, top of the stairs. Breakfast served from 6 to 8, dinner at 6 sharp, no exceptions." Their rooms were Spartan but adequate, narrow beds, washstands with pitchers and basins, small windows overlooking the main street. A connecting door between them allowed for private consultation, maintaining their pretense while preserving propriety. "We'll be here 3 days," Beau said as they settled in. "I have appointments with several ranchers tomorrow and a meeting with the owner of a new silver mine the day after." "And what will my role be?" Fiona asked, unpacking the few essentials she'd need. "Initially, observation. The men here are unaccustomed to doing business with women." He smiled apologetically. "But I've arranged a meeting with Mrs. Thornton, the general store owner's wife. She's interested in expanding their inventory to serve the growing number of families settling in the area." The following days established a pattern. Mornings were spent with Beau's clients, where Fiona observed more than participated, noting the different approach required for these practical, sometimes rough men. Afternoons were her domain, as she met with the few women of standing in the community to discuss their needs and wishes. On their final evening in Eagle's Rest, a late spring storm descended on the settlement, bringing driving rain and howling winds that rattled the hotel's windows. Fiona sat in her room, writing letters to clients in Santa Fe when a knock came at the connecting door. "Come in," she called, setting aside her pen. Beau entered, carrying a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "Thought you might appreciate something to ward off the chill." "The temperature's dropping fast out there," she smiled, gesturing to the room's single chair. "Thank you, it is getting cold." He poured 2 modest measures of amber liquid, handing one to her before settling into the chair. Fiona sat on the edge of her bed, sipping the whiskey carefully. The burn of it warmed her from within, not unpleasantly. "Successful trip," Beau commented, stretching his long legs before him. "The mine owner's order alone will make it worthwhile. Mrs. Thornton's list is quite extensive as well," Fiona added. "Though I suspect some items may be difficult to source." They discussed business for a time, the familiar topic comfortable between them. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rumbling in the distance. A particularly loud crash of thunder made Fiona jump, nearly spilling her drink. Beau laughed softly at her reaction. "Not fond of storms?" he asked. "Not these wild western ones," she admitted. "They're so untamed, like much of the territory." He took another sip of whiskey. "It's part of what I love about this place. The wildness, the sense that civilization is just a thin veneer over something ancient and powerful." The intensity of his expression captivated her. "You truly belong here, don't you?" He considered this. "I belong to the spaces between places. The journeys rather than the destinations." His eyes met hers. "Or I did until recently." The implication hung in the air between them. Fiona found herself unable to look away from his steady gaze. "And now," she asked softly, "now I find myself thinking of more permanent arrangements." He set his glass down. "Fiona, there's something I need to." A tremendous crash interrupted him as the window burst open, driven by a powerful gust of wind. Rain poured in, soaking the floor and the papers on Fiona's small writing desk. They both leapt to action, Beau forcing the window closed against the wind while Fiona rescued her letters and the bedding that had been splashed. Together they used towels to mop up the worst of the water, working in the practiced harmony they developed over weeks of travel. When the immediate crisis was addressed, they found themselves standing close, both somewhat breathless from the exertion. Raindrops glistened in Beau's dark hair and on his face. Without thinking, Fiona reached up to brush a droplet from his cheek. The simple touch seemed to break something in him. His hand caught hers, holding it against his face for a moment before he leaned down, closing the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. Fiona answered by stepping closer, her free hand coming to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart racing. The kiss deepened, his arms encircling her waist as she reached up to twine her fingers in his hair. When they finally parted, both were breathing unevenly. Beau rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I've wanted to do that since Santa Fe," he murmured, "perhaps even before." "Why didn't you?" Fiona asked, her voice barely audible above the storm. He opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. "Because once I started, I knew I wouldn't want to stop." His thumb traced the curve of her cheek. "And because you deserved time to know your own mind without pressure or obligation." The consideration behind his restraint touched her deeply. This was a man who understood the value of choice, of agency, who would never use her vulnerability or gratitude to his advantage. "And now," she whispered, "now I find myself hoping you might want the same things I do." His voice was rough with emotion. "A partnership that extends beyond business. A future together, whether on the trail or settled somewhere that suits us both." Fiona's heart swelled. "I think I would like that very much." He smiled, a rare unguarded expression of joy that transformed his features. Then he kissed her again, with less restraint but no less tenderness. Fiona melted against him, allowing herself to acknowledge the feelings she'd been trying to suppress: the deepening affection, the growing desire, the sense of rightness she felt in his presence. When the kiss ended, Beau stepped back, though he kept hold of her hands. "We should probably continue this conversation tomorrow," he said reluctantly. "When we're both thinking more clearly." Fiona nodded, appreciating his respect for her reputation and his own principles. "Tomorrow, then." He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to each palm before releasing them. "Sleep well, Fiona. You too, Beau." After he'd returned to his own room, closing the connecting door between them, Fiona stood for a long moment, her fingers touching her lips where she could still feel the pressure of his kiss. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but within her, a different kind of wildness had been unleashed, a joyful anticipation of possibilities she'd never dared imagine. The journey back to Prescott took them along a different route, through small settlements and ranches where Beau had established clients. Their relationship had shifted subtly but significantly since that stormy night in Eagle's Rest. Though they maintained professional decorum in public, private moments were filled with growing affection, hands clasped while sitting by the campfire, stolen kisses when privacy allowed, long conversations about hopes and dreams that extended far beyond business. In Santa Rita, a small mining town nestled in the mountains, they spent 3 days with a wealthy mine owner and his family. Jacob Fleming had made his fortune in copper and lived in one of the territory's most impressive homes, a sprawling adobe structure with Eastern furnishings and a staff of Mexican servants. Mrs. Fleming, a former Philadelphia socialite, was delighted to have female company, especially someone who could discuss the latest fashions and social trends from larger cities. She insisted Fiona stay in their guest wing rather than at the town's modest hotel. "Your husband can manage without you for a few nights," she declared, assuming without question that Beau and Fiona were married. "I simply must have someone civilized to talk with." Fiona glanced at Beau, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. They'd maintained the husband-wife fiction in smaller communities, finding it simpler than explanations that might raise eyebrows. "That's very kind of you," Fiona replied. "I'm sure Mr. Sadler will survive without me." Later, as Beau walked her to the Fleming house with her small traveling bag, he seemed unusually pensive. "Something wrong?" she asked, taking his arm as they strolled through the well-tended garden. "Just thinking," he replied. "About all these pretenses we maintain." Fiona glanced at him. "Does it bother you, the deception?" "More than it should, perhaps." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Especially now that it feels less like a convenience and more like..." "Like what?" she prompted when he hesitated. His eyes held hers. "Like a prediction." The implication made her breath catch. Though they'd acknowledged their feelings and discussed a future together in general terms, neither had spoken directly of marriage. "Beau, are you not here?" he interrupted gently. "Not like this. When I ask that question, and I will, it won't be as part of a necessary fiction." He touched her cheek. "It will be because I can't imagine my life without you in it." The promise in his words filled her with warmth. "I'll hold you to that." He smiled, then leaned down to kiss her briefly. 3 days, then we'll have the trail to ourselves again. The Fleming hospitality proved as overwhelming as it was genuine. Mrs. Fleming Adeline kept Fiona busy with social calls, shopping expeditions to the town's limited establishments, and long discussions of her plans to redecorate the east wing of the house in the latest Boston style. Through it all, Fiona maintained her professional demeanor, making notes of items to source and offering suggestions that balanced Adeline's grandiose visions with practical realities. Yet she couldn't help feeling a growing kinship with the woman who had left behind everything familiar to follow her husband to this remote corner of the territory. "Do you miss it?" Fiona asked on their second evening as they sat in Adeline's private sitting room after dinner. "Philadelphia, I mean." Adeline sipped her sherry, considering the question. "Parts of it. The theaters, the proper shops, the social season." She glanced around the beautifully appointed room. "But I've created my own little world here, and Jacob." Her expression softened. "Jacob makes it worthwhile. You love him very much." It wasn't a question, scandalously so. Adeline's eyes twinkled. My parents were horrified when I chose a rough-and-tumble mining engineer over the banker they'd selected for me, but I knew what I wanted. She studied Fiona over the rim of her glass. As I suspect you do, my dear. Fiona felt herself blush. I'm not sure what you mean. Of course you are. I've seen how you look at your beau and how he looks at you when he thinks no one notices. Adeline set down her glass. That's not merely business partnership, whatever you choose to call it. Rather than deny it, Fiona asked, is it that obvious? Only to someone who recognizes the signs. Adeline leaned forward conspirationally. When a man looks at a woman the way Beau Sadler looks at you, he's already decided she's his future. The observation aligned so perfectly with Beau's words in the garden that Fiona couldn't help smiling. We're discussing possibilities. Well, don't discuss too long. Men like that, the ones who have known freedom and chosen commitment, they're rare. Adeline refilled their glasses. Now, tell me truthfully. Are you married to him already, or is that just a convenient fiction for traveling? Startled by the direct question, Fiona hesitated, then decided on honesty. The latter. We're business partners who have recently acknowledged other feelings. Rather than being scandalized, Adeline looked delighted. How wonderfully unconventional, though I suspected as much. Your relationship has none of the comfortable patterns of long marriage, but all the electricity of new romance. Fiona felt her cheeks warm again. It's all very recent and somewhat unexpected. The best loves often are. Adeline raised her glass in a toast. To unexpected journeys and the men worth traveling with. Fiona clinked her glass against Adeline's, grateful for the woman's understanding and discretion. When they departed Santa Rita 3 days later, Fiona had gained not just a substantial order for the Fleming household, but also a friend and ally in Adeline, who promised to recommend their services to her extensive social circle throughout the territory. As they traveled westward toward Prescott, the familiar rhythm of their journey resumed, setting up camp each evening, sharing meals beside the fire, discussing the day's events and plans for the future. Yet now there was a new dimension to their relationship, an openness that allowed for greater intimacy. On their second night out from Santa Rita, camped beside a small stream where cottonwood trees provided shelter, Beau surprised Fiona with a gift, a small wooden box, beautifully carved with desert flowers. I had it made in Santa Fe, he explained as she traced the intricate patterns with her finger. Open it. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a compass rose, suspended on a fine chain. Oh, Beau, she breathed, lifting it carefully. It's beautiful. The silversmith is Navajo, he said, watching her face. I thought, well, a compass seemed appropriate for someone embarking on a new journey. Fiona held it out to him. Will you put it on me? He took the necklace and moved behind her. As he fastened the clasp, his fingers brushed the sensitive skin at the nape of her neck, sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. The pendant came to rest just below her collarbones, catching the firelight. Thank you, she said, turning to face him. I'll treasure it always. There's an inscription, he told her. On the back, Fiona turned the pendant over to find words engraved in tiny, precise script, True North. So you'll always find your way, Beau explained softly, no matter where the trail leads. The simple sentiment brought tears to her eyes. She reached for him, words inadequate to express what she felt. Their kiss was deeper, more urgent than those they'd shared before, a physical acknowledgement of emotions too powerful for language. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Beau rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Fiona Hughes. I think I have since I saw you sitting on that blanket in Prescott, fighting to maintain your dignity while selling pieces of your heart. I love you too, she whispered, the words coming easily, naturally. More than I thought possible after everything that happened. He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes, enough to consider a more permanent arrangement. I know my life isn't conventional, ask me, she interrupted, her heart pounding. Properly. Beau smiled then, to her surprise, lowered himself to one knee before her, taking her hand in his. Fiona Hughes, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Not as a convenient fiction for traveling, but as my partner in all things, for all our days to come. Joy bubbled up within her, bright and effervescent. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, Beau Sadler." He rose, lifting her off her feet in an exuberant embrace that made her laugh with delight. When he set her down, his expression grew more serious. "I can't promise a settled life," he said. "At least not yet. Our business requires travel, and I'm not sure I'm ready to stay in one place permanently. I'm not asking for picket fences and parlor socials," she assured him. "I've discovered I enjoy this life more than I ever imagined possible. The freedom, the constant discovery, the challenge of it all." She touched the compass pendant at her throat. "As long as we're together, I don't mind where the trail leads." His smile returned, relief evident in his features. "Then we'll build our life on the move, at least for now. Perhaps someday we'll find a place that calls to us both, a home base for our journeys." "I'd like that." She leaned against him, content in the circle of his arms, a place to return to but not to be confined by. They talked late into the night, planning their future together. They would marry in Prescott, where their journey had begun. They would continue their business, expanding into new territories as opportunities arose. They would eventually establish a home, perhaps in Santa Fe or Tucson, where they had connections, but maintain their traveling enterprise as long as it fulfilled them both. As the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead, Fiona reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been a desperate widow selling her possessions to avoid destitution. Now she was a successful businesswoman and a bride-to-be, partnered with a man who valued her strength as much as he cherished her heart. The final leg of their journey back to Prescott passed in a haze of happiness. They arrived on a warm afternoon in late June, the town looking much as it had when Fiona left it months before. Yet everything had changed, most importantly, herself. News of their engagement spread quickly through Prescott's close-knit community. Some expressed surprise, others claimed they'd predicted it from the start, but all seemed genuinely pleased for them. The young couple who had been renting Fiona's house insisted on moving out immediately so the bride-to-be could prepare for her wedding in her own home. "It's clean as a whistle," Mrs. Peterson assured Fiona as she handed over the key. "And we left the garden better than we found it, if I do say so myself." Indeed, the small house looked more welcoming than when Fiona had left it, with bright flowers blooming along the path and fresh curtains at the windows, a wedding gift from the Petersons, who had become friends rather than merely tenants. Inside, Fiona was struck by how small and simple the house seemed after the grand hotels and sprawling ranches she'd visited during their travels. Yet it was hers, the one possession she'd managed to keep when everything else was slipping away. "It's strange to be back," she commented as Beau carried in her trunk. "It feels like a lifetime ago that I sat on that porch, wondering how I would survive another day. And now," Beau set down the trunk, watching her expression. She smiled, crossing to him and placing her hands on his chest. "Now I wonder how I'll possibly contain all this happiness." Their wedding took place 2 weeks later in Prescott's small stone church. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, with wildflowers decorating the altar and sunlight streaming through the windows. Fiona wore a new dress of pale blue silk, a gift from Adeline Fleming, who had traveled from Santa Rita with her husband to attend the ceremony. "Blue for the sky you'll travel beneath," Adeline had written in her accompanying note, "and for the faithful heart you carry with you." Beau, handsomely attired in a new suit, watched with undisguised adoration as Fiona walked toward him down the short aisle. When they joined hands before the minister, Fiona felt a sense of rightness so profound it brought tears to her eyes. The vows they exchanged were traditional in form but deeply personal in meaning, each word weighted with the unique journey that had brought them together. When Beau slipped a gold band onto her finger, not the one she had once placed on her blanket to sell, but a new ring symbolizing their fresh beginning, Fiona felt the last vestiges of her old life fall away. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Beau's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. As they turned to face their small gathering of friends and well-wishers, Fiona caught sight of Mrs. Whitfield from Santa Fe, who had made the journey specifically to attend the wedding. "I knew it from the moment I saw you together," the formidable woman declared at the reception afterward. "Some partnerships are written in the stars." The celebration continued into the evening, with food and music and dancing in the town hall. As twilight fell, Beau led Fiona away from the festivities, both of them eager for privacy after weeks of propriety and restraint. They returned to Fiona's house, their house now, which had been prepared for their wedding night with fresh linens, flowers, and a bottle of fine champagne, courtesy of the Flemings. "Welcome home, Mrs. Sadler," Beau said softly as he carried her across the threshold. Her new name sent a thrill through her. "It has a nice ring to it," she replied, smiling up at him as he set her on her feet. "Better than business partner," he agreed, pulling her close. "I don't know, I rather like the ambiguity." She looped her arms around his neck. "The mystery of what exactly we were to each other. No mystery now." His voice deepened as he bent to kiss her. "You're my wife, my love, my true north." Their first night as husband and wife was everything Fiona had hoped for: tender, passionate, a physical expression of the love that had grown between them during their months of travel and discovery. In Beau's arms, she found both comfort and excitement, safety and adventure, the perfect balance that characterized their relationship. Afterward, lying in the peaceful darkness with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Fiona felt a contentment she'd never known before. "What are you thinking?" Beau asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I'm grateful," she replied honestly, "for everything, even the hardships that led me to that market square where you found me." "I think you found me," he countered. "I was just passing through, with no intention of staying longer than necessary to conclude some business." His arms tightened around her. "Then I saw this proud, beautiful woman selling her treasures, and something inside me recognized what I hadn't even known I was seeking." She raised herself on one elbow to look at him in the moonlight filtering through the curtains. "What was that?" "A home," he said simply. "Not a place, but a person, someone who could travel beside me and still be my sanctuary." He touched her cheek. "You're my home, Fiona Sadler." The depth of emotion in his voice moved her beyond words. She kissed him, pouring into the gesture all the love and gratitude that filled her heart. They remained in Prescott for a month, organizing their business affairs and planning their next journey. The orders they'd secured during their territorial circuit were substantial enough to justify the buying trip to the east they'd discussed. "St. Louis first," Beau explained as they pored over maps in the small office they'd established in what had once been Fiona's parlor. "Then Chicago, depending on what we find. The railroad makes it all relatively straightforward." "And New York?" Fiona asked, trying not to sound too eager. "You mentioned it might be possible." He smiled at her transparent excitement. "Definitely New York, Mrs. Whitfield's order alone justifies it, and there are suppliers there I've wanted to establish relationships with for years." Their plan took shape. They would travel by stagecoach to the nearest railroad connection, then by train to St. Louis and beyond. They would spend the autumn and early winter in the east, returning to the territory by spring with the goods they'd purchased for their clients. "A working honeymoon," Fiona commented as they packed their trunks. "Most brides would be horrified." "Are you?" Beau asked, pausing in his task. "Not in the slightest." She came to stand beside him, resting her head against his shoulder. "I can't imagine anything more perfect than seeing new places with you, building our business together." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "We'll make time for pleasure as well as business. I want to show you the theaters in New York, the parks in Chicago, the riverboats in St. Louis. I'd like that." She smiled up at him. "Though I must warn you, once I've seen these grand eastern cities, I may develop expensive tastes." "I'm counting on it," he replied with a laugh. "Your refined sensibilities are what make you so valuable to our enterprise." The day before their departure, they visited Daniel Hughes's grave in the Prescott cemetery. Fiona placed a small bouquet of wildflowers beside the simple marker. "I need to say goodbye properly," she explained to Beau, who stood respectfully a few paces away. "And perhaps thank him in a way. Thank him." Beau asked, surprised. Fiona nodded. His poor decisions led me to that market square, selling my possessions. If not for that, we might never have met. She gazed at the grave. He wasn't a bad man, just a dreamer without the practical skills to make his dreams reality. I hope he's found peace. Beau moved to stand beside her, his hand warm on the small of her back. That's generous of you. It's honest, she replied. I've made my peace with the past. Now I'm ready for our future. As they walked away from the cemetery, hand in hand in the golden afternoon light, Fiona felt the compass pendant Beau had given her resting against her skin beneath her dress. True north. She had found hers in this tall, principled man who had seen her value when she was at her lowest point, who had offered partnership instead of charity, and love instead of mere convenience. They left Prescott the following morning, the wagon loaded with their personal belongings and the necessities for the journey to the railroad. The house was closed up, rented once more to the Petersons, who were expecting their first child and grateful for the additional space. As the town receded behind them, Fiona felt none of the anxiety that had marked her first departure. Instead, there was only anticipation for the adventures ahead and gratitude for the man beside her who had changed her life so completely. Ready for the next chapter, Mrs. Sadler? Beau asked, glancing at her with a smile. Fiona reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. With you, always. The road stretched before them, leading toward distant horizons and a future they would build together, one journey, one decision, one day at a time. From the ashes of Fiona's old life, something new and beautiful had risen. She had been selling the last of her possessions when Beau Sadler bought her freedom instead. What he couldn't have known was that, in doing so, he had also found his own.